Hey, co-authors. Welcome to today's episode. Today I'm joined with Nichole Harken, who is an associate professor of instruction and internship director for actually the department that I'm in, the communication media department here at UNI. She's also the creator of the project Next Step and author of the book of the same name, and has a podcast called The Next Step, Leaping to Adulthood. Thank you, Nichole, for being here today.
Absolutely. Excited to talk about this in a weird way. I love lit reviews.
Okay, very cool. So let's talk about that. What do you love about literature reviews? Because most people, that's not the place that they love.
Very true. I love it so much that even in our department, when I teach communication research methods, I have students do a lit review. I love it so much that when I teach a freshman class called Cornerstone, which is an integrated writing and speaking class, I teach freshmen to do a lit review. Now, granted, it's a baby lit review, but it introduces them to the synthesizing of information and research and ideas and organization. Whenever I teach sort of these big papers and, people will say, oh, well, isn't that just an outdated process? I'm like, well, okay, yes, but no, because I think whenever we teach and we focus on learning, there are always those sort of secondary things that in some ways become the primary things. So if we're teaching a giant paper, we're actually teaching organization. We're teaching time management. We're teaching them the skills that when they get into that first job and they are in a lead of a giant project, that they know how to break that down into smaller manageable pieces, to give themselves sub deadlines, to think about what needs to be into those pieces that make sense, how to link those pieces together. And when you think about that skill set, that's writing a gigantic paper, and a literature review is part of that.
One of the things that I just saw is that there was a recent study that was done that said folks who rely on AI or other types of large language models to help them with their literature reviews, it's creating some problems in the research process. Well, there's a lot of problems, but one of the problems particular to literature reviews is that it ends up, those LLMs pick what is most used in an area. And what that usually means is that they are oversighting and over-reliant on like theoretical frameworks from the 70s and 80s. Like if in my field, communication education, if I were to put it in there, it'd come back with social cognitive theory from Albert Bandura. Like everyone cites him. So the AI does that too. And I think that to your point, like helping students navigate the nuances that are out there in the literature is where they are developing skills to see how even small differences in the way that we talk about things or organize things can actually have really big implications for the rest of their project.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that goes with that is thinking about, so I'll talk through a little bit of how I get started in a lit review, if that sounds good.
Yeah, go for it.
Right, having a solid topic. And honestly, I always tell my students, I don't even care what your topic is. It could literally be rocks, but you have to be fired up about rocks then, right? Like you spend however long researching and reading about a blade of grass.
Right.
So
yeah.
if that's your jam. I am not one to evaluate your jam. Okay?
Right. Yeah.
I am, because I'm kind of a jam connoisseur. I don't like jelly. I'm totally a jam person. But whatever it is that you're in, because you're going to have to settle into that. And that's how I describe it. Like you're going to have to settle into this, hunker down and really explore all of the things. And so I always think, when you get that topic, one of the first things to do is think about all of the associated words to that topic. As part of getting started in that lit review is getting enough literature. And how do I extrapolate quotes, text excerpts that then fit together in sort of this puzzle piece kind of fashion?
Yeah. Well, let's dive in on that a little bit more. So whenever you say seeing themes across things, like what are ways that you do that, or how do you know that something is a theme across the literature that you're reading?
It just keeps popping up. Right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things too, when you do the lit review, and maybe this is one of the reasons I get so excited about it, is that it can serve as the vehicle for your research. Like, oh, I thought I was going to do this thing about basketball. I love the sport of basketball. Well, it turned out, as I started to dig into this research, I really like to read about the leather of basketballs and how that has evolved over time, or how that influences the way a basketball bounces. And so I always think that a lit review is really helpful when you think about those topics being so big, to help you to narrow that down, because as you read, you're like, oh, this is the thing that I am really, this is what I find interesting. Yes, I love the sport of basketball, but this is something I didn't know about. And this is something that's exciting to me. And then I think that that really helps you to center in your searches, right? The point of the lit review is to prove to other people that you can make an argument. That's it, right?
Right.
We need to know that you have read enough, that you're not just like, my dad who's like, well, I think this. And I'm like, what have
Right.
you read lately to prove that? Well, I just think it's because I'm 77 years old and I have the right to think whatever I want, which he does, right? But lit review absolutely provides the proof to other people to say, wow, they really are well informed about leather and basketballs. So I
Right.
should believe now the research that they're going to show to me that they have completed.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, I find that whenever I'm working with folks, whether they're students or clients or whoever, like they're interested in this like big idea or this big topic. And I think like what you're saying, yeah, you're interested in this big thing, but usually that idea is too big to do in a single research project or a single book or whatever it might be. Like that's what you're interested in is like your program of research over the course of your academic career. So how do you break that up into small pieces and figure out how to work towards that? Well, that's the literature review process, right? You figure out, here are the things that other people have said about this or haven't. Here's the things that agree with what I thought or disconfirm the things that I thought about. But that is about you getting more precise and then making an argument for that precision.
Yeah. And I like to talk about it too and this is mine when I was writing my dissertation, is I always had this vision in my head of like a three-legged stool. Okay.
Huh?
And like my big topic, right, which was, of course, the transitioning out of college and what that experience looks like and feels like. That was the seat of the stool, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So, what are three things that hold that seat up? What are the things? And so I started to think about, okay, how does a college or a university support that transition? How does a family support that transition? How is that transition impacted by human development, like Maslow
Right.
and like other, human development, Piaget, all of these theorists.
Right.
I started to think about that. And I'm a very visual person.
Hmm.
And so I would draw pictures,
Yeah.
a lot of pictures, try to think about how things fit together. And even, and we may get into this a little bit later, but once I really started to dig into the reading, my first lit review for my dissertation was 83 pages.
Oh my gosh.
Right? And my dissertation advisor was so funny because she was like, Nikki, I know that you love this topic and you love reading about this topic. It's so obvious. You do not need this much. And she said, I want you to get it down to 40. And I'm like, 40? Okay.
40.
40. So I really worked hard at thinking about, okay, the research that I've read, who is sort of saying the same thing in a way that I can summarize that in a couple of sentences and then put that nice paragraph or parenthesis behind it that's like blank and blank and blank and blank and blank.
Look at these other studies. Yeah.
Like, okay, all these people kind of said the same thing.
Right.
So I get it down. I sent her a message. I'll never forget. I had 41 pages. I was like, listen, I got it to 41 pages. I was angry. I was an angry owl. Right? And also because you're so attached to the topic that you're like,
Yeah.
they're going to cut out. He comes back and she says 30. And I was like, you've got to be joking. What can I possibly cut out? Because of course, at this point in time, you're writing a dissertation. So you not only have your regular lit review, but you also have that theoretical framework piece of it, right?
Yeah.
I read every single thing that had the theory of motivated information management in it, right? And so then I looked at it and I'm like, okay, what can I pull out of here though and put somewhere else? So what can I pull out and put into the framework part of this, into my chapter 2? What could I even pull out of this and put it in my results chapter to say, okay, I found this thing and these other people found this thing. And I got it down to 32. I sent her a message. I said, that's it. I'm quitting if you make me go. Which I did not quit. But she was satisfied with that.
Yeah.
It is hard because this is a thing I had always loved to do. And so you're in this program with peers who are like, I can't get 8 pages. I don't understand how you're doing this. And I'm kind of looking at them like, I don't understand how you're not at least 92 by now, right? Not in a judgmental way, but just,
Right.
and
There's just so much out there, right? Like, how can you not write more on this? Yeah.
and Kyle, I have to tell you, I also think that my age had something to do with that.
Mm.
I had been working with these students for 10 or 15 years. So I was full in. where I
Right.
think if you're heading straight from your bachelor's to your master's, to your doc program, you may not have that sort of life experience with your
Yeah.
that lends itself to, I know where to pull data, I know where to pull research from.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree for myself, so I went straight through, and my master's degree was actually just a 1 year program. It was an accelerated program. So I just kind of like blazed through stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said on whenever you're, 29 years old and you're working on your doctorate, like you don't perhaps have your thumb on the pulse of the problems that are outside of academia that allow
Mhm.
you to pull on those things in quite the same way. I think of a lot of folks that I work with, especially those who are in EDD programs, and a lot of them are folks that have had careers or at least had some sort of time in K through 12 schools, in administration, something like that. And now they're coming back with that experience. And I think that does something different for a lot of them.
Yeah, I completely agree because when I started my program, I always tell this, it's fun. I got my doctorate, right? Walked across the stage exactly 20 years after my master's degree, right? So I say in that 20 years, I raised two really amazing humans, moved, lived a lot of life. But the thing that happened was that I was really able, like you said, to put my finger on what students were reporting back to me as someone who worked with students at the end of their collegiate careers, but also to think through what that process looked like for myself. And then I watched my children start to go through the process and was
Yeah.
like, whoa, wait a second. This thing that I experienced is still happening. Wow. Like we still don't have financial knowledge. People still don't know how health insurance works. So it wasn't just me in the year 2000, right? And then because I had been in higher ed, I've always, very much had an equity mindset because
Mhm.
then I got angry. Right.
Yeah.
And I started thinking about, wait just a second, right? Like our business majors are leaving with this knowledge, many
Mhm.
of them, because that's just the requisite knowledge that they have in their degree programs,
Right.
finance and all of these things. Our social workers do not. So we have these majors who are more than likely to get ahead anyway, just because of their choice of career, correct?
Right.
Who are then getting farther ahead because they have access to this knowledge that social workers and teachers and archaeologists and anthropologists that they don't have. And then that made me angry because I'm like,
Yeah.
so we aren't starting on a level playing field career-wise at all.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, that whenever I encounter that in my real life, right, those instances that make me angry about injustice or frustrated with the process or just curious about why something is the way it is, that's whenever it takes me back to the literature. And it's like,
Yes.
okay, I've encountered this thing and it just kind of has stuck in my craw and I can't get it out of my head. What have other people said about this?
Yep, and that's exactly it. So, I wasn't sure that that was actually I had 2 topics going into doc school, into my doc program that I was really interested in.
Yeah.
And so, my first topic was admission policies that, like, I always still feel this way, like, who am I to say that you can be successful or not? You can
Mhm.
have somebody with a 35 on their ACTs who failed out of college.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, and you can have someone who gets a 17, barely cracks a 3 point, who absolutely rocks it. So that was gonna be my first thing. But I read literature about college transition. There's not a lot out there, right? Not a lot of research out there. But what I found was that the research that I had was 20 years old, 15 years old. I'm like, wait a second. So we've known that this problem has existed for this long and nobody's doing anything about it? But
Yeah.
what are we doing? Right?
Right.
So I constantly am getting anything that might be a match to college transition, university to work transition. And I have a stack of things. Well, and I don't have time to get to them. And then every once in a while, I'm like, oh, maybe I should abandon it because I don't feel like I'm current. And then I'll sit down and read something. I'm like, oh, it's still there.
Yep. It's like I don't know if you remember way back in the day, there was like the old Looney Tunes. There was the gambling bug. And
Yeah.
he'd like bite, I think it was Bugs or maybe Daffy or one of those. But as soon as he bit him, then like their eyes would hit the dollar signs. They'd have to go back and start on the slot machines. That's how I feel whenever I read a really good article. It's like, oh, I've been hit by the research bug again. I guess I'm doing
Absolutely.
something.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think, maybe talking about very early on developing a system and a process. Because I think that's one of the things when we talk lit review that really gets at people is they end up with stacks or emails overwhelmed with tags and how do I save this and how do I save that? I think it's important to talk about that every person's organization structure looks different as they dive into that lit review. So me, I'll talk about mine. I still am a paper and pen person. I still like to hold a book. And
Yep.
so I love annotating. I write all over everything. It drives my husband crazy because we try to share books and he's like, I do not want to read this book and read all of your thoughts. And I'm like, yes, you do. Of course. So I printed everything I still do. So I print it
Yep.
off. I take my pen or my pencil to it. I underline things. I add notes to things. I add questions to things. If it's something really good, I might add stars. I kind of had my own kind of
Yeah.
method, like, oh, here's a 3-star thing that's really important, right?
Yep.
Could really tie into the research that I'm doing. So then what I did, and this is going to sound duplicative, okay, but it worked for me. So I used an online program called Zotero, and I still have it's a paid subscription. I still pay it because anything that I still read, I put into Zotero. So I would annotate the bejeezers out of the paper stuff, and then I would scan it in, and then I would put it into Zotero, which, by the way, tracks all of your bibliographic information. So source, date, year, pages. It will even find, like, I don't know how to source this paper that was presented at a conference, and it'll examples of how to do that. And then I would attach my copy, my scan. Okay? Then I would take my paper copy, 3-hole punch it, and put it in a binder. And I still have like 8, 10 binders of, well, it's because, yes, I know I can pull it up. And I do that still for quick reference. Oh, yeah, this was in some article. And the thing I like about Zotero is I can search, so you can tag it based on topics. So I have tags on career services, tags on finances, tags on study abroad, whatever it happens to be. So I can pull it up by tag. I could pull it up by phrases that I might remember, but there's still something to me about going back to that article in paper form
Right.
and completely rereading it. I've been known to reread 10 things and add more notes. Right? Because I'm like, oh, this is a thing I maybe didn't realize the first time that I read it, but now it's an important thing to me. So that was my organizational strategy. Like I said, it might sound duplicative to some, but it is the thing that worked for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that a couple of things. So first off, to your point, like, yeah, I think people have different systems for organizing their stuff. I think what's most important is that you have a system, right?
Yes.
I kind of feel the same way as you did, which is to say, I never really felt like a smart person. I did not do well in high school, didn't do terribly well as an undergrad. It wasn't really until my master's program that I felt like I was actually interested in school.
We're just late bloomers.
Yeah. But I think that for a lot of folks, they are typically and have been habitually high achieving students. A lot of their natural or innate work ethic, intelligence, ability, whatever you want to call it, makes it to where they've not really ever developed any process for doing something as big and as long over time as a dissertation or a thesis or a book or anything like that, or having a complicated journal article. And so they don't have an organizational method. They don't have ways of doing that. So they end up trying to just keep it all in their heads. And yeah, it is
Yeah.
not going well. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah, you just can't. So then what I would do is I would figure out, what are those pegs holding up that chair? Right? What are these big areas? And then I try to think about what are the sub areas in the big areas, right? So I'm
Uh-huh.
always just trying to kind of chunk away at things. And then what I would do, Kyle, is I would just pull quotes out of all of these things that I was reading, right? I would just kind of plunk them into place. Okay. When I teach this, I actually give students puzzle pieces to
Yep.
this, connects to this. This is how we put
Yep.
it, being able to see that. And then I would go back through and connect everything, right? Like
Yep.
connecting sentences. And, when I teach it, I always tell my students the hardest thing, I think one of the hardest things about doing the lit review is not inserting your opinion. I mean, it's your opinion because you're choosing it,
Right.
but by and large, it's not about you. It's about what other people have discovered.
Yeah. I mean, the difference between inserting your opinion, which is not good, as opposed to inserting your analysis of what's going on there and being able to show a reader, here's what I've read and here's how this produces this analysis is much different than, well, this is just how I feel about this thing.
And so I think that is hard. Now, when I teach it, I always tell students that first draft, that's fine to do that. Like if that's what you need to keep your brain going and to keep
Hmm.
your typing, then do that. And we'll come back over it and take that out and think of
Right.
the two things. But I think of all of the tricks of my trade, this is the one that is probably the most maybe insane and good at the same
Yeah.
time. So I will go through and I write it and then I cut it apart literally with a pair of scissors. Okay.
Okay.
And I make sure that if I have subtopics, that
Hmm.
topics are it's that parallelism idea, right? Because
Yep.
if you have a subtopic that's 5 pages long, then that probably should be your topic.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
how you know your topic is too big, right?
Right. Yep.
Really like looking at how much I have written about this thing. And so I have been known to cut things apart by paragraph, sometimes sentences,
Uh-huh.
and reorganize them on my table and shift things around. When I first started the first version of my lit review, I think I did it with note cards
Yeah.
and I taped them to the window of our office. And I
Okay.
literally just like took a step back, right? Because I had 24 different topics.
Yeah.
Okay. I knew I had to collapse them. So I have these 24 note cards and I literally put them on the window in our office. I took 2 steps back and I just stared at them until it made sense to put things together. So all of a sudden I'm like, oh, okay, wait a second. This is about finances. This is about career exploration. This is about socialness. This is about like fraternity. There was some research on the impact of Greek life in transition,
Right.
right? I'm like, well, wait, those 3 things are like student affairs. Okay, I'm going to make a student affairs column, right? And then
Right.
once you start to do that, it starts to take form on its own of like,
Yep.
oh, hey, no, these aren't just all separate things. They do connect and make sense in a
Right. Yeah, I mean, to extend your metaphor, like whenever you think of a stool, yeah, you have the legs of the stool, but also you have the spokes that connect those legs to each other, right? And
yes,
so that's for stabilization, that's to keep it stronger. And so, yeah, thinking about, okay, what are the ways that these different legs of the chair actually do make sense? Because eventually it's all supporting the overall topic that you're trying to get at.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So I think those are the big organizing strategies I use. And then,
Yeah.
you know what? Edit, edit, edit. But here's the deal. I am a firm believer that you can't really edit your own work because you know exactly what you meant when you typed the thing. Makes
Yeah.
you. So I have a real tendency. I gave it to my husband. I give him
Mhm.
all of my lit reviews because
Yep.
he's a safety guy. He knows
Yeah.
about what I'm interested in and
Right.
because
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
he knows that, but he is so valuable and helpful in that way of like, this doesn't make any sense how you went from this to that. And I'm like, you're right. It does not. So I think sometimes giving it to that third party person who knows you and will be
Right.
truthful to your little baby research project, also truthful in this doesn't make any sense how these things are connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the thing is like, if you're working in a more specialized fields where it's kind of harder to have someone read that stuff, like just try to explain it to someone,
Mhm.
right? Like if you can't communicate what you're trying to do to someone in a succinct way that allows for maybe not a person who's got a doctorate, but, someone who's intelligent and is able to have those conversations. If you're talking to them about it and they can't understand it, that might be an indicator that you don't understand it well enough to communicate it to them, right? And that you need to go back to the drawing board and either figure out how it is that you're organizing it that's not working for you, or how are you communicating it in a way that's not helping because there's something that's missing there, if that's the case.
Yeah. And the thing I love about this, I get pretty fired up as you can tell about this, but I'm going to really geek out for a second. Okay.
Okay.
So you use the example of the spoke, right? So this happened while I was doing my dissertation. So my husband says, this doesn't make any sense. Like, you're making this leap and I don't think that the leap makes sense. Right. And in my brain, I'm like, yes, it does.
Right.
But you also are like, I have to prove it. I can't,
Yep.
right? I know this to be true. So you should,
Yep.
right? There is such joy in finding that peace
Yes.
that I can remember I leapt out of my chair and he looked at me because he works from home and he travels too for work. But he looks at me and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I found it."
I
Like,
found the Holy Grail.
and then I sent one of the professors in my program, I called him and he answers his phone. I'm like, "This is Nikki." And he's like, "Nikki, who?" Phone number's at the top of the syllabus. And I'm like, "It's Nichole Harken." And he goes, "Oh, Nikki, what's up?" And I was like, "I found it." He's like, "You found what?" And I was so excited. And he got really excited. Like, I found the thing that, and it's just one. It was just research article, just one, but it had the piece that linked the two things that
Right.
made the whole thing make sense. But you're not going to find that on your first library search. That's just part of it.
Is digging around there. Part of why it's so satisfying to find that article, right, is because sometimes it's not easy. It's tucked away in some obscure journal, or there's just one piece on it, or it's just kind of a one-off deal. But then next thing you know, you're like, this was the key. This is the thing that's going to unlock everything for me.
Yeah. And I think that you mentioned something there that I think sometimes when people start searching, if you have a topic on education, like, I'm going to search all the education journals. Well, yes, but it can be in a wide variety of journals. It could be in the, Psychology Bulletin Today. I found lots of great stuff in management journals because it was about workforce development and
Yep.
it was about transitioning in and out of organizations, which is essentially what graduation is. I found things in social work. When we talk about how it feels and what happens when we are emotionally stressed, when we're going through transitions of any kind, right? So that information can really come from anywhere. I think also learning how to work your library system. I was in a program that did not have a library orientation, and it was fine for me because I worked in academia. But if you're in a program where people haven't been into a college library or experienced a college library since we were pulling cards out of a card box, which is true.
For a lot of folks, yeah.
And then it's like Greek. It's trying to understand Greek.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary how smart and well-trained your modern day librarian is, right? Like the things that they can do is just crazy.
Yeah, these folks are mind-boggling to me. And the things that they do, they're not just like walking around the library helping people get books checked out.
So before I let you go, we've been talking a lot about literature reviews and how to write those. And I want to give you a little bit of time to talk about the stuff that you're working on. In particular, you have your podcast Next Step. You have the book that comes along with it. So what are some things that you're doing there? And talk to us a little bit about how that all came about.
Yeah. So the Next Step program really came about from my own experiences. You heard me talk about that a little bit earlier. I always tell the story, and it's the first thing you hear in my podcast, that I will never forget. I had graduated with my BA in 1999, and I'm sitting across the table from my mom at Applebee's. This is one of those moments that's so clear, like you can almost smell it.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a chicken wrap because wraps were kind of new at the time and real trendy. And Applebee's fries, which were pretty fire at the time. Yeah. We're sitting at Applebee's celebrating. And this is about 2 weeks after graduation. Okay. And so she slides this manila envelope across the table to me. And she's like, "Oh, hey, these are yours." And I am not kidding you, Kyle. I thought for sure there was going to be like a graduation check, some cash from grandmas and grandpas or aunts and uncles. Like, oh, this is an exciting envelope. Right. So, but of course, I was taught to not be rude. So I was not going to open it in front of my mom, right?
Right.
So I get back to my apartment and I open it and it was life insurance papers. And I was like,
oh yeah, I guess I need this now, don't I?
And I'm like, I don't know what this is. Like, didn't understand it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the next one was car insurance renewal. And I was very blessed in that my parents paid for my car insurance until I graduated from college. Right. And then actually when I went back to get my master's degree, because they really wanted me to focus on school. And that I think was the impetus because Kyle, I didn't figure any of that out till maybe my late 30s. Like I just didn't. Bills, I kind of fumbled along. I didn't understand insurance rates. I chose retirement because somebody told me that was the plan that I should take. I had no knowledge of these things. It just was never, ever in my radar. And this is not me being rude about my parents. The other part of this is that I grew up on a farm, which was great, but my parents had never had, for instance, organizational health insurance. They were self-employed. Their land is their retirement. They had never negotiated a higher salary. I had literally no one that I could talk to.
Yeah.
And then by the time I'm like 37, 38 years old, Kyle, I'm so embarrassed that I don't know these.
Right.
Like wildly embarrassed. And here I am, like absolutely pretending I know what's going on, right? Full on pretending. I'm like, I need life insurance. I have 2 small children. And he's like, let's talk about your assets. And I'm like, None. None.
You're like, sir, are you coming on to me?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so the Next Step program is a program that we use in our department. It runs concurrently to internships. Essentially, we do 50-minute workshops every week. And here, I think, is the key to the program is I don't know all of the things, so I bring in experts, okay? So I bring in a former student of mine. He is now a financial planner guy. His name is Eric. He's amazing.
Yeah.
So like when we talk about retirement, what's the difference between a defined benefit, defined contribution? What's a vestment schedule? What does rollover mean? And what is an ESOP, right? Or a couple other things.
So you have retirement, negotiating your first job.
Health
what
insurance.
are some other things? Health insurance?
Health insurance. We do a session on health insurance. We do a session actually on navigating a job offer. What all should be in a job offer? We talk about when you get paid. You get paid twice a month. You get paid once a month. That's important when you're budgeting. And what I really want students to know is that when they graduate and they get the lonely factor, right? You're past the excitement of the new job and you're in a new place and you have your own apartment and you're actually getting paid. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't have any friends here. I'm a very lonely human.
Right.
I want them to know that that's normal.
Yeah.
And that they did that 4 years ago when they came to college.
Yeah.
So you will get through this again. But I think anytime we can give knowledge to students in a way that we're like, what you're experiencing is normal is really important.
So you have this class that you have, this internship class. You also have your book that you have out. You have the podcast.
Yes. The exciting thing I think about the book, particularly for me, is that there are different versions of it. So there is a general version that has information for anyone who's graduating from college. But I think that the really cool thing is that we have a book specific for our college. That QR codes that links back to our financial aid, that links to our career services, that links to our alumni association, to our foundation, so that no matter where students go in the next 5-10 years, they can easily go back to that book, hit the QR code, and be at those websites for their university. And I've always said, like, I would love to have a University of Nebraska version, a Wisconsin version, a Missouri version, whatever, to help all students stay connected to those universities.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah. And so what I will say is, as we're wrapping up here, if you're interested in getting those types of resources to your students, the book is the next step, correct?
Yes. Yep. Next step.
Same thing for the podcast. If you want to assign that to your students or use it yourself, it's the next step, leaping to adulthood. And it's Dr. Nichole Harken is the person who's doing both those things. And if you're looking for someone who can do workshops or speaking or anything like that, I know that Nikki also has that. So if you want to reach out to Nikki, her email is what?
Nichole, NICHOLE.Harken, HARKEN @u.edu.
Awesome. And so make sure to reach out to her. I'm sure that she'd be happy to connect you about those things, talk more about research and the research that she's doing to really help students. Thank you so much, Nikki, for being on here. Yeah, this has been great.
It's been so fun.
It's always nice just to get to sit down and talk with you.
Yeah, you too.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you in next week's episode. Hey, co-authors. What's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.